So let's hop right into it. For today's agenda, I'm going to talk to Jen and Parisa about SB 1383 and specifically how it relates to food recovery and sustainability, because the two go hand in hand, right? Under SB 1383, there's been some recent food recovery requirements that schools, for four schools that we'd like to go over today, along with some ideas on how to make our cafeterias more sustainable. I've been working a lot with clients on this, and I know it's been a little bit of a controversial one. It's been frustrating for some people, and we've had the ability to talk with someone yesterday about it who does a lot of trainings with different nonprofit partners who support schools on this legislation. And she reminded us, there's a lot of heart behind this rule. So I kind of just want to start the chat off today talking about how this rule relates to food security. Of course, all of us in this room are passionate about feeding kids and making sure our children, many of whom don't have steady access to food, having access to that food. And then with the heart of it, it's also a climate change bill. So it's kind of shocking. We were talking about this yesterday that up to 76% of waste in school cafeterias prior to this legislation going into effect had potentially was edible. That's like kind of shocking, right? um, and when we throw it in the trash, it goes into our landfills, and that really impacts our climate. It produces methane gas and fills up the landfills, and that's just not quite good. So that's really where we're getting at with all this. So the heart of this legislation is about food insecurity. It's about climate change. It's about food waste recovery. And I think in many ways, it can relate to money too. Like it all kind of translates to dollars, right? So if we're throwing away like 530,000 tons of food from a school cafeteria every year, that translates to about $1.7 billion. That's a huge percent of our federal nutrition dollars just going in the trash. Think about all the amazing organic raspberries we could get with that, or the antibiotic-free chicken, or just some really good food and higher paying jobs for our staff. So I think that's really incentivizing to think about, because again, as we work through this legislation, when we're working with our clients, it's been a frustrating one, I know. So I kind of just want to ground our chat on that today. And so I think I'll kick off with my first question. Now, Jen, I know a little bit about SB 1383, but for our audience today, can you define what it is and, just a little bit of the basics around the rule?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for setting us up with all that background information, Jackie. I think it's really important to sort of be reminded of that because, as a former director myself, I feel like sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, another rule. I just empathize with what it's like to be in a school and dealing with, a million things every minute. And then, I don't know, since 2024, we've had 15 new laws that impact our programs in California. It's like you laugh or cry. Um, so yeah, let's talk about SB 1383. So SB 1383 is a new law in California. It's actually we'll talk about the timeline in a moment. The piece that's really come into effect as of January 1st, 2024 is the part that has to do with recovering and donating edible food. So, but it's more than just that. It's about recycling and composting. And then there's actually an education component surrounding it as well. And as we were preparing for today, and something we like to do in general, just with all the work we do at LunchAssist, is we always really like to go back to the legislation and say, okay, what does the law actually say? What are our obligations under the law here? So I invite you to take a peek at the law as well. So I'm going to put it in the chat in case anyone is a nerd like me and wants to read. And you can actually take a look at everything in the law with my highlights on it. So I'll throw that in there in case that's helpful. But you can see here on the screen, basically there's an organic waste recycling component. There's an edible food generators component to it. So organic waste recycling, that's a little bit out of our jurisdiction, if you will, as nutrition directors. that really has to do with like our maintenance and operation department, but still something that we can help communicate if it's not already in compliance at our schools. So essentially with the organic waste recycling, our school district, so this is specifically in the legislation as like LEA requirements, so school district, or like if you're a charter school, like your charter org requirement. So organic waste collection services should already be in place at every school district, and then containers for collection of organic waste. That's like the first two components, and then it kind of goes on to saying like having policies in place that prohibit organic waste from going into a non-organic container. So I guess that sort of relates to us in the cafeterias, especially so that we have policies in place for our staff to, if we, things happen in the kitchen, we like burn a tray of something, like that food should go into the organic bin. Or if we have leftover food or food scraps from cutting up vegetables or things like that, we're cutting melons, the rind, all of that food scraps and food waste that's organic should be going in the organic bin. So that's and then having training and information to employees and students. So having like access to that information. So that's the first part. And then we've got edible food generators. So as schools, we're considered tier 2 commercial edible food generators. Like, very sexy name there. So as of January 1st, 2024, we're supposed to have some sort of written agreement with a food recovery organization to collect the edible food. And it says maximum amount of that edible food. So like, of course, there's that ideal of like, it's supposed to be everything that could possibly be edible that like it's not going to be food scrap would be collected. But we'll talk about what that looks like in a practical way today, because we know like you can't just go from 0 to 100 like on January 1st, which already passed. So like we'll just kind of get into that a little bit. And then kind of along similar lines, two more little bits and pieces. So we've got edible food recovery on the next slide. There's like just a good note here that like nothing in the law, or the law actually says that you can't prohibit the share table. So an LEA can't prohibit that because, like during COVID, it was sort of like people were like, no, share tables. So I think they kind of put this in here I don't know if it was because of COVID, but it's basically like a good reminder that like share tables are back with a vengeance. And then the enforcement. So I meant to add a cute little like Santa Claus naughty list graphic to this slide because the enforcement is a little bit of a naughty list. It's not a huge, fine or anything. We're not in New Jersey where apparently there's a law that fines schools $2,000 a day for not following a similar rule. So thank God for that, that we're not going to be, bankrupt because of this law. But the enforcement on it is not very strong. And so I think a lot of us, we like to teach to the test if we're looking at like what's the repercussions. The repercussions at the moment are essentially a notice of violation, and you have 90 days and then 180 days after that you could like become compliant. So if a school still doesn't comply after these notices are issued, then they could go on essentially a website that's called the Organic Waste Recovery Non-Compliance Inventory. Another sexy name. But that's basically the naughty list from CalRecycle that schools aren't complying. So none of us want to be on the naughty list, and we don't know what that means. But sometimes things like, is our program in good standing? Like potentially a school district could be like, oh, you're not in good standing because you're on this list. So who knows what that means? But that's just so it's not going to be like something that at the moment we don't think this is like going to like necessarily any other auditing type of situation. It's just that's kind of like where we're at with it. So and then this is a timeline. So I just want to backtrack here for a second and show us like we're talking about SB 1383, but there's been a lot of legislation in California about all of this going back to even 2012, 2016. These 3 bins with organics should have been in place in 2020. So I know the pandemic changed a lot of things and got us off track with different things, but the organic bin in particular shouldn't be a new thing, but I know it is for a lot of districts. They're just getting them set up. So just FYI, that's kind of the timeline at play.
Cool. Thanks for breaking that down for everybody. So now that we know kind of breakdown, how do we know if we're in compliance with SB 1383?
So there's three things that you really want to have in compliance with on the edible food recovery in particular. So with the edible food recovery, we want to have share tables in place. We want to have a written agreement with a food recovery organization and then some sort of food donation process in place. So that's essentially like the heart of the edible food recovery. And I love Preetha's going to kind of show us what she's doing. So we get like a good picture of what that could look like. And then I'd love to hear from y'all in the chat too. Like if you are already doing this, what does your food recovery look like? So that's something that is like I would invite you to put in the chat. And I just put the recycle or the Cal Recycle Model Food Recovery Agreement in the chat as well. And then organic waste recycling, we want to be looking for those organic waste containers and an organic waste collection service in our school districts and in our kitchens and anywhere where we have trash cans, and then policies and training. So that's really like the heart of the compliance. And you can see here just a couple of the cute graphics from the Go Green initiative. They have some great resources that you might want to share with your district as well. So this is what like your 3-bin system is supposed to kind of look like. And then the edible food recovery, essentially it's got like 2 tiers. So you've got food share, which is essentially going to be your share table. That's going to be the main way you can do that with the food that's generated from your cafeteria. And then food donation goes outside the school with a written agreement and some other type of entity that's coming to collect. And we'll actually on the next slide, I have some information about like USDA compliance on this, because you might be thinking like, wait, so how do I manage this within like SB 1383 is a state law, but I've got my USDA compliance, like you always go with the stricter rules, right? So I think this is really important to point out. So share tables are allowable for several USDA memos going back actually to like 1990. And there's a lot of good resources on that. And then food donation is allowable. There's a couple memos here, and these are linked on the slides, and we'll send the slides out in the follow-up email. But with food donation per USDA, we can only donate to food banks and 501c3 nonprofit organizations. So that's really important to know. So I think you have to be really careful if your school district is asking, oh, can we like put the food in the teacher's lounge, or could we do like a food pantry on campus for families? That would be great. The teacher's lounge, definitely not allowable, but the some sort of food pantry on campus for our own students, like, that would be lovely, but it has to be organized through some sort of 501c3 nonprofit, whether that's the PTA or if there's like another 501c3 that can organize that. So just food for thought on organizing your food donation process. And then when we're looking at organic waste recycling, just being cautious about how that's billed. So of course that's all like allowable under USDA rules, but I put like a little like yellow or orange proceed with caution, because your organic waste containers, if they're only used in your cafeteria, like solely for the school nutrition program, then of course you could buy like extra organic bins for your kitchen because that's used just by you. It's exclusively for the school nutrition program. But if it's like containers for the kids in the cafeteria, or like all the green bins for the campus, that's not an allowable cost for school nutrition. And then organic waste collection service shouldn't be something that's billed directly to you. If you have any questions about allowable costs, that's definitely something that you can run by CDE. You want to make sure that the district's not trying to charge you for the organic waste pickup because you're the food generator, because there's other organic waste on your campus. Kids bring lunches from home, all of that. So that's just kind of my little caveat on you, like the mishmash, like we always deal with, right? Of like state and federal regulations, like not playing nicely together, and how you get them to do that.
That's awesome. Thanks for really going into that. It's good to, keep in mind state and federal. There's so many things to keep track of. So now that we have an idea of compliance, what can schools do to kind of weave SB 1383 into their school nutrition programs?
Yeah, so I'm gonna pass most of this over to Teresa in just a moment, but I do want to mention just some stuff that like we can do just in general with all of our programs, right? And especially like USDA compliant stuff, things that we've already been doing as nutrition directors, many of us, right? So I love this concept of love food, not waste. This is from San Diego Unified. This is kind of how they market their offer versus serve and like some of their sustainability practices. So if anyone from San Diego is on the call, say hi in the chat. You guys are amazing. So love food, not waste. That's what we're all trying to do, right? So we do that through a variety of things like offer versus serve. We do lots of menu forecasting to prevent waste, looking at production records, following standardized recipes, and using correct portion sizes. Those are things that all of us do. It's just good business as well for our bottom line. So just keeping in mind, like you're already doing a lot of these things, like you're not starting from scratch here. And then repurposing leftovers. This is something that I don't know if Michael Jochner's on the line from Morgan Hill. If not, I would totally reach out to him. He's a really great chef director that we work with, and he loves this whole like, and I do too, this whole concept of like trying to build your menus around like how a lot of restaurants and small cafes do. Like if you're going to do roasted vegetables one day and then like you're going to have some leftovers, then the next day use those leftovers in roasted vegetable pasta, right? And like building your menus in a sustainable way so that a lot of that waste or a lot of that food that's left over is repurposed the next day into another entree. That's difficult menu planning. It's challenging. That's why I like personally to do it because it's like freaking hard. But like if you can figure out ways to do that, especially with more of like the freshly prepared meals and like ways we're doing scratch cooking, like freaking kudos to you and share with us so that we can all like learn from what you're doing because that's a really great way to increase sustainability. And then share tables, I won't say too much about share tables. I do have a few slides just to click through here, but share tables, we have a new lesson coming out on this. If you're not familiar, they're just a place where students can place their leftover food after they, or not leftovers, but food that they don't want that they took. So like, let's say they took some, an apple, they don't actually want it. They just took it because of offer versus serve. They can place it on the share table. And then if it's, any items that are on the share table, other kids can take it. And then if you want, you can, and you should under this legislation really reuse those items back into your cafeteria. So you can like take the apple and the milk that's been placed on the share table as long as it's been like, kept safe and cold and all of that. You can bring it back into your operation. If it's got edible skin, you can wash it, bring it back into the inventory and reuse it. So it's like a full cycle. It's served, but they didn't eat it. It's still wrapped, safe. It can be brought back into the operation. So like I said, we have a new lesson coming out on that. Catherine's been working on that one. So I'm excited for that one to get published soon. And yeah, those are just some things that like any school district could do to sort of get the ball rolling in this direction.
Awesome. Those are some really great ideas and thoughts. Now I'm curious, Parisa, what do you do about organic waste recovery at your school?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Jen and Jackie, for having me. So I am the child nutrition director at Cypress School District. It's near Long Beach. It's a pretty small elementary only district. And I think because of our size, we were really able to implement most of what Senate Bill 1383 requires, but as I'm learning more about it, I'm realizing that we're falling short in a lot of things that they really want us to do. They definitely set the bar high. And in full transparency, I do have a really great maintenance director who initiated about 70% of this. I was just kind of along for the ride, providing input and sharing what is expected of my staff. So um, the best practice for waste sorting stations, here's a really awesome infographic that LunchAssist made. And it seems like a lot, but they want us to start out having a share table and then going and doing a liquid dump, a recycling station, a landfill station, an organic station, and then having your trays separated so that they can be stacked up and take up less landfill space. But again, this is the best practice. But let's just get started with like the bare minimum of what's required under SB 1383. They want us to have a share table, a recycling section, a landfill section, and then an organic section. So we really don't have to do the liquid dump or do the trays. Now, here is what Cypress is currently doing. In place of share tables, we actually have share coolers, and I have a slide on that in a minute that I'll share with you. And in terms of recycling, we're not actually sorting the recycling stations at our waste sorting. We just kind of have the custodians doing that separately. Um, I just realized by doing this like webinar that we are supposed to have recycling bins in every area, including offices and classrooms, but I'm hope maybe one day we'll get there. I just don't feel like we're at that point to be able to do that just yet. Again, this bill is kind of asking a lot, and we're doing everything that we can in small sustainable steps. So we do have a landfill section and then an organic section. And then we do stack our trays. And recently we decided to switch to compostable trays due to a student writing a petition. And fortunately, we have a little bit of money saved up, so we were able to switch those over. It's definitely more expensive. I think it's almost double the cost. We were paying about 6 cents each styrofoam tray, and we're paying about 11 cents now. And I do want to share that the compostable trays that we are getting are a little bit harder to separate. So we have our staff actually have to spend like 10 to 15 minutes a day just separating them prior to lunch service. So just a disclaimer there. This is how we have our waste sorting station set up. We teach our kids to sort their food when they're done eating, but while they're still sitting down. So then when we call them up by table, they can go through the station and they actually go from right to left. So they're going to start at our share cooler. And then they throw away their trash in the landfill trash cans. And then we have a green organics waste bin right there. And then last, they put their trays on the table and we stack them up and then we put them in a tray bin. So we ensure that they're nice and compact. And here is a close-up of our share cooler. In the fall of 2023, we had already been utilizing shared tables, but we were throwing away like 80 to 90% of it because our students eat outside in Southern California and the food just wasn't maintaining temperature in the bin or on a table. We were using ice pillows, but like they would melt after 20 to 30 minutes. And anytime you would go temp anything, there was no way that it was 41 or below. So we decided to buy share coolers and we created these like labels on them that we just laminated to keep them closed, and then the items that the students can put in there. So we get a lot of things like that sliced apples, milk, yogurt, string cheese, a lot of potentially hazardous foods that we want to make sure is staying cold. And you're probably wondering, well, how did you get all these kids to do this, especially at an elementary level? That was no easy task. We made a video. It was actually a teacher on special assignment, and she created this video that students would watch the first week of school. We have the maintenance director and then ed services all got together. They shared it with the teachers as part of their curriculum. And every day for the first week of school, the students are supposed to watch this before they would get released for lunch. So it was definitely a collaborative effort. It required a lot of different departments working together. And in the beginning, our waste management company actually decided the first 2 weeks they weren't going to put any of the organic recycling into the organics because we knew it was just going to be a hot mess of like random things that are put in there. Because it took a lot of training and a lot of supervision to teach the kids where things go. But when we did a training with the custodians and the student activity supervisors, I guess they kind of misheard that. And there was a rumor going around that they weren't actually going to go into an organic waste bin, that they were all just going to go to the landfill. So it's stupid that we were doing this. And I think it just speaks to how important it is to clearly communicate to your staff why you're doing something and be able to kind of squash those rumors so that you get that buy-in. And then as far as our cafeteria organic waste goes, we were provided these green bins also for the cafeterias. So I did a laminated poster separate from the ones in the share bins, reminding our staff the items that we're allowed to put in the organic waste versus what we can put in the trash. And like Jen said, if you burn things accidentally or things go bad, you want to make sure that those are the items that you're putting in there. I was kind of surprised to learn that our waste collector did not want us to put things in there like chicken bones or corn dog sticks. So make sure you reach out to your waste management company to get the specifics of what they will actually take on as organic waste. I think it kind of depends on the company that you're working with.
Wow, thanks, Teresa. I love all your little beautiful pictures, and it's great to see, pictures of actually real life stuff. So that's organic waste. What about edible food recovery at your school?
Yeah, so that was my next task. That's like the most recent one that we're required to do. So like many of you food safety sticklers, I've always been really nervous to donate our leftovers, especially if they're items that we know that are in the hot boxes sometimes for up to 6 hours. We used to cook our food at 7:15 in the morning, and then we would serve it at lunch. But we recently changed our operation, so all of our sites are cooking at each school site instead of coming from a central kitchen. So most of our food is only being held for 2 to 4 hours. So I felt a little bit more comfortable with that, and I just feel like the quality is better if you're gonna cool that down and then serve it or donate it. And so when I called our county consultant, we had somebody from the county come out and let us know about SB 1338 or 83 and all the things that we had to do. And they would kind of reach out like every couple of months. And so I called them and I asked, like, what exactly do we have to do for edible food recovery? Because like we're a small elementary school district. If our staff are forecasting correctly, we might not necessarily have more than like 5 or 10 leftovers. So it just doesn't make sense to have somebody come and stop and pick up food that might not be there. So he said that the bare minimum they're really looking for is making sure that we have a contract in place. Um, and so we reached out to food finders, and I think that they're just so overwhelmed with all the people that are reaching out to them for donations because of this bill. It did take a while for them to get back to me. But ultimately they helped me create a contract, and I have some of those links that we can put in the chat box. They made it really seamless. They're a really great organization. I know it might be more difficult for school districts that are in more rural areas, but maybe you can use some of the resources that they shared with us to kind of come up with your own contract or come up with what things that you can and can't take. So I kind of went over my menu with Mark from Food Finders and said, would you guys be willing to take this or this? Like this might be, I can't be 100% certain in terms of food safety for some of these things. And he was like, no, let's not take those. So we decided that we would have them come out and pick up 2 days a week. And it was really tough in the beginning because I didn't really have a way to bring the leftovers back to the schools, to the central kitchen for them to pick up just at one location. So we invested in a Cambro cold refrigerated cart. It's one of those new ones that you can plug in and it cools down. And then we have that in our truck. And then when our driver delivers to the school sites 2 times a week, he picks up some of their leftovers. And that way we can provide like a large amount of food at one time instead of them picking up at each site. So then we also had to figure out which items we felt comfortable donating. Our lunch is over at like 12:40 and our staff leave at 1:15. So they're not able to cool certain items and log them. So we decided just to start really small and simple with easy to cool items, mostly breakfast items like bagels, breakfast pizza, sandwiches, pancakes, waffles, scones. But then there's certain things like pizza, quesadilla, barbecue chicken, those things cool pretty quickly. So I just made sure that the staff take the temperatures of those items and ensure that they're able to be cooled within like half an hour of service being over.
Nice. Wow, that's a lot. I can tell a lot of work and thought has gone into this program. And it's there's so many things to think about. So um there's a lot of moving pieces, I can tell. How have you addressed limited staff and storage capacity?
Yeah, I think that's been the most challenging piece. Many of us are dealing with declining enrollment, and our district budgets for staffing and support staff like custodial and supervisors isn't quite as like cushioned as it was during COVID. And so it's really those support staff that are overseeing the students, separating the food, and the custodians that are having to pick up trash and organic waste from multiple bins now. And it really was challenging the first few weeks. I feel like some of our supervisors felt like we were maybe asking a lot of them. But now that we're in it, having done it for almost a year, it's just the norm. So they've kind of figured out a system, and I think the students are learning, and the students they're so great at it. I mean, it did take a while, but now it's like second nature. Like kids are so adaptable, and now I see them scrape their plates off and it's no problem. So just like any big change that you're implementing, I think it's really important to share the why, how it impacts the environment, share the bigger picture so that you can get your staff buy-in. We had back to school trainings with the student activity supervisors and then trainings with the custodians, sharing the changes, and then each of us went to a school site that first week. Some schools made it work within a week, and some sites needed a little bit of extra help and support, but I do think that it is possible. And then in terms of my own staff in nutrition services, I really stressed to them that like, hey, we're just getting started with this. It's a new initiative. I told them just do what you can. I don't expect you guys at the end of your shift, if you had a really crazy day, to go in and wrap like 30 individually packaged burritos so you can put them in organic waste. Like if you're short on time, you can put those in the trash, and on the days that you have more bulk items, put that in the organic waste recycling. I mean, quite frankly, some of the requirements that they're asking of us in this bill are very costly, and some of it's not as realistic. And I feel like I'm doing the best that I can with the resources that I have, and just trying to focus on making small, sustainable changes. And Jen and I met with Jill Buck from the Go Green Initiative yesterday, and she said that it's just really important to document the steps that you're taking. So if you're reaching out to different organizations and trying to comply with this bill, just document those things. They really just want to see that we're trying to make progress. And in terms of donations, I thought that the staff were going to kind of push back a little bit because now they're going to have to package the food at the end of the day. But I think that we all work so hard to prepare this food and we hate seeing it thrown in the trash. I was sharing with Jen that sometimes when I see the staff like packaging the leftovers and it coming back to the central kitchen, they like package it with such care. And I think that it really gives them a lot of pride knowing that someone in need is actually going to be enjoying the food that they make instead of being put in the trash.
That's so great to hear. I love the heartwarming stories, and you all do so much work, and it's great to see that, continue on instead of going into the garbage when it can. And yeah, you have a lot of really great insight. So now I'm a little curious, like at the district level, how did you garner support from district administration so that it's not just a nutrition services initiative?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely important to mention that it can't just be us. We play a small piece, but it does need to be a group of people. And I just got really lucky that my maintenance director like really wanted to take this initiative on. We had the teacher on special assignment supporting it. And then Ed Services like rolled out the video. But Jen, I know you as a previous director, you also worked for a really supportive district. Can you tell us about the green teams you guys had at Encinitas?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think like it really comes from the district. A lot of these initiatives, right? We can't do it all on our own in nutrition services, and nor is this SB 1383 fully our responsibility. It's not a USDA rule. It's a California state rule that is impacting a variety of people across the community. So, yeah, when I was a director, I worked in Encinitas school district that has actually had a lot of this stuff in place, like almost everything that's listed in SB 1383 that we're talking about today. Encinitas was doing like back in like 2014. And they're just a really progressive district. It's part of the culture there. And one thing that they were doing, it was this like school site green teams and then a district green team. So I just wanted to throw this out here because this is considered a best practice for SC 1383, but then I saw it in practice as a director, and I just wondered if anyone else on the call has a school site green team or a district green team. Essentially, it's just like a concept of like bringing together the folks on your campus, students, parents, administrators, teachers, who are passionate about green initiatives, and then forming a coalition. And in Encinitas, our folks like met every month, and sometimes I would go and like share about our school farm lettuce and things like that we were doing. But usually I wasn't even part of it. I would just go on occasion, and it was like our superintendent, our board members. We just, again, the culture of that district was very supportive of these initiatives, but I think it could work in any district and can really help channel people who are passionate about these topics and give them an area to channel that in support of the things that do need to be done. Like there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of people who are passionate about this work. And so school site green teams are a really good way to sort of organize that. And again, not something that you need to take on as a school nutrition director, but something that you might just like float if you're having these conversations with your admin to be like, hey, like I know this is a lot, like have you heard of this? If you're talking to your CBO or your ed services folks, there's some great resources on the Go Green initiative. I put their link up in the chat so you can kind of see they have green team resources. And then, I mean, just like thinking about this concept from SB 1383 in general, it's not just about nutrition services, like we said. It's not just even about the school district. Like school nutrition, we're just like one piece of this puzzle for SB 1383 to work in our state. It's a climate action bill at its heart and a food security bill. So we're like one little piece of commercial edible food generators, right? And then there's like all these other players. Like we have to have cooperation from our waste management companies, which I know some of y'all are struggling with even having access to organics from the waste management side. We have to have food recovery services that will, work with us, and food recovery kitchens and pantries that will accept things. And so it takes local government sort of stepping in and helping with that as well to like facilitate those connections. So I think, and the health department has to like not give us a hard time about our share table. So it's just, there's all these moving pieces. So I just want to like kind of, that's sort of something I wanted to share and like remind us all of, because it can be frustrating when we have all these extra things being thrown at us all the time. And just know like this one is bigger than us, but we wanted to talk about it nonetheless, just so we kind of have some talking points. I know a lot of us are like talking to CBOs and superintendents and stuff like that and trying to sort it out in our own kitchens to sort of like get a good framing of like how we can go about it as nutrition directors.
Yeah, it really does take a village to get these things accomplished. So, uh, yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Teresa and Jen. It's been so fun chatting with you. Thank you, everybody who's been putting some questions in the chat. Before I get to those, I just wanted to let you all know that the webinar recording, along with the slides and related materials, will all be available tomorrow. And then next week, we will put them out on LunchAssist Pro and send them in our weekly newsletter as well. And you can count our talk today as professional standards hour. So there's your learning codes. Don't forget to track those. Um, and I know many of you will want to access the recording of today's call. So for those of you who are current LunchAssist Pro members, we'll add this entire webinar series and all the corresponding resources directly into LunchAssist Pro's training library. And then the recordings will also be available on YouTube, and we'll link them in our follow-up email as well. And then, of course, like I talked about at the beginning, we offer a variety of training and one-on-one consulting services. So if you want to work with a consultant like myself and help you out with different compliance-related tasks like SB 1383, you can go ahead and reach out to Mike. He's on vacation today, but he will definitely get you set up. And remember, there's lots of training videos and resources inside LunchAssist Pro. So without further ado, let's go to the question box. It looks like Diane Eckstein has a question. She says, is there an exemption or waiver if our local waste collection center is not set up for food waste recovery?
Oh, I was trying to take myself off mute. I'm already off mute. Hi, Diane. Good to hear from you. And I know you're in Yosemite area, so it's definitely you're meeting like the rural designation, right? So if you're in a community that power cycle determines, a lot of times it is in a rural area, then they do have some exemptions. So you want to reach out to your county specialist through Power Cycle. I'll try to put that link in the chat and they can give you more information on how to apply for an exemption. And someone correct me if I'm wrong, I think the exemptions are more surrounding organic waste exemptions, not on the food donation piece. But you can always ask them about that, like, because yeah, that can be tricky as well in rural areas.
Yeah, that's Jen, that's been our problem is they only have like residential bins. And it wouldn't, it wouldn't be large enough for our needs. And then they were going to charge like just a special fee for the guy to get off the truck to move it close to the truck to load it. And it's like, okay, all these added costs are just prohibitive.
Totally. Yeah. And you guys are really small. So even though that's not like a school nutrition program cost, that would be an impact, like a big impact to a small district like Yosemite. So I think definitely talk to Cal Recycle about that and just explain it. And they are able to issue waivers. So hopefully they can help you guys out. And the other thing that can happen, we were talking yesterday about this a little bit. We have a client who's actually in LA and their company is basically like refusing to offer organic bins, and we're like, wait, you're like in the center of the universe, like why like why LA is like where this should be happening, like a no-brainer. And so I don't know, sometimes you can even maybe put pressure if you can't get an exemption in this type of situation and you're having a lot of issues with waste management, you might be able to like go to the city because some of these contracts are managed by the city as well, or some of the agreements like with who's able to provide waste management services in a jurisdiction are kind of organized through cities or counties. And so I think Power Cycle is probably a good first step, but then if you're not getting anywhere, then talking to like city county representation to be like, hey, what's going on with this? Like, what can we do?
Thank you.
Yeah, and it looks like Tracy Drew put maybe the link to Cal Recycle's waivers in the chat. So
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, very helpful. Okay, next, Melissa Herrera asked, I'm having trouble trying to find an alternative system to compost trash pickup. The cost for a 2 times a week pickup in our location is approximately $500 a month. With all the budget issues for the upcoming year, this is just too much. Any suggestions for a smaller site?
Yeah, I think maybe looking into the exemption, and then like, yeah, I think definitely making sure that that cost isn't like that $500 a month isn't getting passed on to the nutrition department because organic waste is not an allowable cost. There are ways, like again, you'd have to talk to CDE if they wanted to directly bill that. There are potentially some ways, but it's supposed to be part of your indirect cost rate. So that should be billed to the district. But if that's still cost prohibitive for the district, then having like the district M&O department maybe reaching out to Cal Recycle about an exemption, and then just seeing what can be done about all of that. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like this is an unfunded mandate, but yet there's a lot of costs that are passed on. Like just think about like Teresa, how much did you spend on coolers and like staff training and your time? Where did that come from? Your budget.
Mhm. Yeah, it does end up adding up to be quite a bit. And I think that that's what was so frustrating in the beginning is we're like, you're asking us to do all these things, but like it's all with no funding attached. So I think as all of us, we're trying to prioritize so many different things in our program, so many changes. We want to do scratch cooking, we want to do local foods. And it's like, okay, I do want to do what's best for the environment, but at what cost is it gonna take away from something else that I'm trying to implement? So just trying to, I would just say start small and do what you can at this point. I know that we're probably none of us are in compliance as of right now. I mean, I felt like we were doing a great job until I read through the regulations and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like not even close. So I would just say start small and do what you can.
And something that Jill mentioned yesterday that I thought was really kind of a good thought is like, all of us that go through reviews and whatnot, it's like documentation is key, right? Document, document, document. So she mentioned something along the lines of like having kind of just like a documentation of like, what are we doing, but what are our goals? Like what would we like to get to? And kind of like even just having that is like, okay, look, we have some things in place and we want to get to point B over there, but we're not there yet, but we're working on it. So like Parisa said, start small and kind of just go along and add a little bit whenever you can, whenever it works out, and take advantage of things that you can, like waivers, if we can get some of those approved for our small super rural areas.
And I know in Orange County, they have somebody reaching out, like I said, who is like a consultant. So just document the people that you reach out to, the emails you sent. Like I had reached out to food finders for at least like 5 months, maybe every couple of months, I'd shoot them an email or I'd try to make a phone call. And then when that person reached out to me and said, okay, what have you been doing to comply with this? I was like, look, I've tried calling this person, I've tried emailing this person, and can you provide me resources to find a donation facility? Because whoever's going to be like monitoring this should also be supporting us to make sure that we're successful. It should not just all be on us.
Yeah, 100%. Our next question comes from Rach Dacus. I really apologize if I butcher anybody's name. I'm going to plead I'm from Montana. I'm here in San Mateo County. It's been extremely challenging with finding an organization that will pick up leftover hot entrees at all of my schools. We do not have the pounds needed to warrant pickup at each site and cannot collect all hot leftovers from our sites ourselves to bring them to one location for pickup.
Could you cool those items? I'm wondering. Even if you don't like have blast chillers or anything, if you could just get like some Cambro chillers or use ice pillows to try to cool them and then maybe save them for the next day if you do have a driver who can pick them up and then take them to a central location. I think that that might be an option if it's possible.
Yeah, and it could like how you started with preset, it doesn't have to be everything, right? And it doesn't even have to be as much as you're doing. I was thinking back to like when I was a director, one of the things we were doing was like we had hot transport, so we really couldn't save hot food because it had already been hot for like way too long. But we had like a little bit of a collection like you're doing, P, and we would like collect it and it would go to the central kitchen, and once a week someone would take it to the food pantry. And it wasn't much, but it was something that like of stuff that we wouldn't necessarily reserve. Or like just thinking about how can you incorporate more of your like do the best you can, right? There's nothing in the law that says like you must do your hot entrees and save them for the next day. It's just to the max like the maximum amount. So I think like Rach for you and San Mateo County and like what you guys can do is what you can do, right? So I kind of like to think about it on a spectrum. I don't think that's really how like the legal side of it is thought about, but like I feel like we have to be pragmatic. So like there's like a spectrum. There's people who are going to donate the every single piece of edible food possible, like, and their school is in an urban area and it's right next door to a food pantry, and like every single thing, it's like zero waste. And then there's going to be folks who are like just starting out, and maybe you could just start out, you're able to organize like anything that's short dated, that's going to expire soon, that's like before a school break, you've got extra that you know you're not going to use before the weekend, and you have stuff like that's in your centralized facility, or it can be like brought to that very easily. Like the driver's already there, he's just bringing back a few things to the centralized facility so that it can go to the food bank on Fridays. So I think like there's this spectrum, and don't feel like, I think sometimes it can feel defeating. Like I can't do all of it, so I'm going to do nothing. And not to say that's what you're doing, but like I feel like that sometimes with certain things, right? I'm like, oh, I can't do everything, so I just feel like I don't want to get started. I think just getting started and doing a little bit, then if you ever like get questioned on what you're doing, you can explain yourself and you can say, hey, look, this is our limitations, and if you want us to do more, like what support do you have to offer? Yeah.
I think Rachel
Yeah.
just responded that she's a little bit nervous about the time temperature documentation, and I was too. I'll be honest, we are not documenting the temperatures of cooling. Like our staff just don't have the time to do that. If you're really nervous and you really don't want to like deliver or provide any type of potentially hazardous foods, could you start out with maybe like breads or things that you're serving for breakfast? Like if you have leftover bagels, or we do scones, and each school site maybe has like 9 or 10 leftovers. We have 6 sites that ends up being like 60 scones every week. So there's somebody out there that would really appreciate whatever you can provide.
You know, and the other thing we didn't talk about, I should have mentioned this because we do talk about it with our clients from time to time, is like the USDA allowances to offer leftovers to students. So if I can just quickly explain this, I hope it doesn't create too much like questions, but so you can't serve like free second meals, right? Like a full complete second meal has to be charged. But if a student just wants to come up from the at the end of lunch, if you have leftovers, and let's say you have like a few slices of pizza left over, if you want to do this, there is parameters within the USDA menu planning guidelines that you can offer a second slice of pizza. It's called a leftover or second. Like I think seconds, right? Jackie, is how it's referred to in the administrative review manual in the dietary specifications assessment tool. So you can do seconds. There are some rules around seconds, like you're supposed to include the seconds in your nutrient analysis, but I wouldn't stress too much about that because nutrient analysis isn't usually looked at very closely anyway. Like, so, and it's just a small, minute amount. It's not going to throw off your analysis. So, like, if you just have like 10 slices of pizza and you want to open that up to your last grade group, like if your 6th graders go last and you're like, okay, at the end of meal service, if 6th graders want to come back for seconds, first come, first serve, technically that is allowable. And it doesn't have to be charged if it's just second portions. It's not a second complete meal. It's just you are opening a little bit of a can of worms of like how you monitor that and stuff like that, like in terms of making sure people don't intentionally overproduce because they know all the sixth graders want two slices of pizza. So there's like a little bit of a balancing act there. But yeah, that's something that can be done, and some people do, and does help kind of just use up the leftovers with your kids. And yeah, it's an option.
Yeah, thanks. Alice Hernandez asked, we do not have anywhere in town to donate food to, and out of town places only come to our location once a week. With storage shortage and not a lot of pounds to donate, since we use our leftovers for a third choice, I'm not sure how to be compliant.
Yeah, I think you just, again, like, I feel like some of this is like just doing the best that you can, you know? Yeah,
I think the first
if
step is
places,
like trying to find a
yeah.
contract, right? Like, so
Yeah.
she's saying that there's no place that will set up a contract with her to take the food.
I think so. Mhm.
Okay.
And then the places that could are out of town and they only come once a week and they don't have the storage to um keep that
Really
much
save
food
it.
left over, which I
Yeah.
hear from my clients all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a tough one.
Yeah. But
Yeah, but at least it's, yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
I think it's just that documentation piece, you tried to make the connections and you're documenting what's available to you, and what's not available to you. And, this could be a situation. Again, I also like Jen, I'm not totally sure on the waivers as far as like if it's edible food recovery or just organic waste. But it's definitely worth reaching out and kind of, seeing what waiver might be available to you in your
Mm-hmm.
rural area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with donation, like even if they can only come to your location once a week, like if they can take something, at least you've kind of got the ball rolling and like starting somewhere, and eventually it kind of grows. But I think just getting that agreement into place and then having some sort of system, even if it's really, really small to start, then that's okay. You're taking a step in the right direction.
And something that I think is important to know too, that like we've been discussing a lot with our clients is like kind of around the rules is like we need to have this contract or MOU in place. But if it's something that never gets used because maybe you don't have a lot of leftovers, you really don't have much to give or whatever, like that's okay. You have the MOU in place and that was like the piece of the puzzle. So that's kind of something to keep in mind too.
Yeah. Like if it's before break and somebody accidentally orders like way too much milk, or you like, there was one time when I was working in Marietta where we had fires and school was canceled and we had like 90 pizzas. And so I put them in my car, like in the back of my Honda Civic, and I went and took them to like the firefighters and they appreciated it, but that was like not probably what we're supposed to do. I didn't have any MOU or anything in place. But I feel like in certain scenarios like that, maybe they would be willing to create a contract with you in case there's like an emergency scenario. Maybe they're not going to come pick up from you weekly, but if you had some type of event where there's school closures or something where you have a surplus left over, maybe they would come pick up from you. I think that that's at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Tracy DeRue asked, can you please talk about some of the counties that have approved waivers? I've read it on CalRecycle. I know this is kind of sporadic. I really haven't heard of two. I have like one client that has gotten a waiver and that's about it, but I cannot for the life of me remember what county it is.
Yeah, I don't think we've had too much success with the waivers quite yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be
Yeah.
a work in progress with that one. And it might not necessarily be county, I'm not sure on this, but it might not necessarily be just county specific. It could be area specific too, because you can have, a pretty populated town within a county that has rural areas too. So I think no matter what, it's worth reaching out and just asking if you
Mm-hmm.
need to. Um, Diana Carrilla asked, this may have been mentioned, but are share bins, coolers, or carts an allowable expense for the child nutrition program? Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And for kit funds.
Um, yep, and kit funds. Yes, true. Um, do you have any information about nuances for schools receiving meals from a vendor? Aside from working on reducing waste through orders, are there other responsibilities for the vendor versus the school?
Yeah, I can talk about that one, and then I think we'll have one more question, then we can wrap up here. So on the vendor side, like if you're like a charter school getting a vended meals, I know I don't know if it's CalRecycle or CDE or who released guidance on this recently. We can try to pull it. There was some guidance for our food service management contracts, or food service management company. So if it's a food service management company, that is providing their staff, so like if you have like a Sodexo that's like managing the school nutrition department, then they're responsible for the food recovery efforts. But if it's like a vended meals company that is not providing staff and they're just providing food, and then it works just like any other company, like Gold Star delivering food. Like Gold Star is not responsible. It's the school nutrition department or the school, the LEA technically actually, that's responsible for kind of the food donation piece of it. So again, I guess it kind of falls on who is considered the commercial edible food generator. And so it's like the school nutrition program in most cases, but if the school nutrition program is completely outsourced to Sodexo or Airmark or, you know, Chartwells, then those companies would be like running the little, you know, school restaurant that is needing to kind of, or school nutrition program cafeterias that would need to recover edible waste.
Cool. Thank you. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Yeah, do you want to round us out, Jen?
Yeah, I can add one more question. I know, Diane, you were asking about logs or records of food waste recovery or disposable for AR purposes. Right now, nothing on this would be in the AR. So it's just any documentation you want to keep for due diligence if you get questioned on the SB 1383 side. So, and then food safety logs as usual. But yeah, I think that rounds us out for today. Join us next week when we'll be talking a little bit more about the new May revise in the state budget and some other financial kind of things with all the supplemental funding that's been coming at us. Like we're gonna just sort of organize that a little bit. So yeah, love to see y'all next week. And I guess we'll see some of you in between on client meetings as well. So all right, have a good week, everyone. Take care.